Hi class, I want to take you through the quotations exercise and show you how to correctly punctuate each of these examples. In the first one, you can see here in the original that the period is outside of the quotation marks. That disconnects the attribution, which is the person who said the quote, and the quote itself. So you always want to use a comma in between the quotation and the attribution. Also, the punctuation goes inside the quotation marks. So the correct version is our goal is peace, comma, end quotation, claimed the president. In number 2, Benjamin Franklin said death takes no bribes. In this case, because Benjamin Franklin said is not a complete sentence, and it's just an introduction, it will take a comma instead of a colon. And then death takes no bribes, you want to capitalize the first word of your quotation, unless you're just using a partial quote and integrating it into your sentence, which we'll get to later. And here again, you can see the period on the outside of the quotation. You want to put the period on the inside of the quotation marks. So correctly, Benjamin Franklin said, comma, quotation, capital death takes no bribes, period, end quotation. For number 3, in this case, mom's writing thing is a partial quote. It's going to be integrated right into the complete sentence. She said her son refers to her literary endeavors as mom's writing thing. In this case, we're going to integrate the phrase, the partial quote, into the full sentence with the word as. Typically, either the word as or the word that can introduce a partial quote. And either of those two words don't need to be followed by a comma or a colon. So the correct punctuation here, she said her son refers to her literary endeavors as mom's writing thing. No comma after as. The quote is contained within quotation marks, and the ending punctuation is inside the quotation marks. Number 4. In this case, you can combine sentences to increase the pace of the writing, to increase the energy of the writing, and to conserve words. So he is a scuba diver, pilot, and also enjoys skydiving, period. And here comes the quote. I like challenge, he said, something exciting. In this case, the attribution, he said, is missing in the exercise example. So there needs to be some attribution that these are his words. Now you can position this attribution in the middle of his quote for some pause, or you can put it at the end. Either would be correct. It's really about what effect you're looking for. So what I did was I put it in between the two for a little bit of emphasis. He is a scuba diver, pilot, and also enjoys skydiving, period. Quote, I like challenge, comma, end quote. He said, comma, quote, something exciting, period, end quote. Okay, the next example. In this case, it would appear that the punctuation is correct because the period is inside the quotation marks here. However, the attribution is on the outside of the period, so it looks disconnected from the quote itself. So using a comma here still keeps the two connected. So the correct way to punctuate this, the dangers promise to be of indefinite duration, comma, end quote, the president said, comma, referring to the Mideast crisis. We use a comma after the attribution because it sets the attribution off, and then the rest of the sentence can continue. In the next example, what's happening here, there are several quotes from the same person. So you can put the attribution wherever it's most effective, okay? A free press can of course be good or bad, comma, but most certainly without freedom it will never be anything but bad, comma, end quote, said the writer, comma, Albert Camus, comma, in one of his books. The rest of his quote, freedom is nothing else but a chance to be better, whereas enslavement is certainty of the worse, period, quotation. In the next example, What you have here is the attribution at the end of all of these quotes. So what you can do is you can take a look at the quotes. How do they run together? What's a nice way to present them? Where does the attribution go where it sounds the best? So I started with Jesse Owens expressed the opinion that, quote, I think that America has become too athletic, period. From Little League to the pro leagues, comma, sports are no longer recreation, period, end quote. He continued, comma, they are a big business and they're drudgery, period, end quote. So I took this, he continued, and I didn't actually use it until in between the second and third quotes to break them up. And then I didn't need a comma or colon before introducing the first quote because I'm using a partial quote and integrating it into my complete sentence. And I introduce it with that or as. Number 8. The man smiled. It's a great deal for me, he explained. I expect to double my money. Now what I did here is when you see an attribution that looks like an action, you have to ask yourself, do you really smile words? Do you really smile what you speak? You speak your words. So you can say the man smiled and then put a period that's the end. It's a great deal for me, he explained. I expect to double my money. So his smiling is not his saying. Okay, so you don't smile your words. Be careful of picking attribution words that aren't synonyms for speaking. And then what I did here, I started this quote off with a capital I. It's a great deal for me. And then because I am connecting these two quotes, okay, it's a great deal for me. I use a comma here, comma, and quotation marks. He explained. So there's the attribution. And here's the rest of the quote. I expect to double my money. In the next one, what's happening here, similar to the one above, it says she grinned. I like seeing my byline in the paper. In this case, again, she doesn't grin her words. So you can just say she grinned, comma, adding, also, I like seeing my byline in the paper. The other thing here is that you don't need this dash here. You can use a comma instead. The woman responded by saying, comma, quote, I'm not paid much, but the work is important. It's varied and exciting, period, quotation marks. In this case, this example is correct. The librarian announced to reporters that the new building, quote, will cost somewhere in the neighborhood of about $4.6 million. This is a partial quote. The writer is using this partial quote to complete the sentence. The partial quote is set off in quotation marks, and because it's running right into the rest of the sentence, it doesn't need any attribution. It doesn't need to be set off with a colon or a comma, and you don't need to capitalize the first word of the quote. In the next one, what's happening here is you have two possible attributions in the example, said the professor, and he said. Now, if you work this text in such a way that you flow it together, you can actually just end up with one attribution, which saves some words and makes it a little more concise. So, thousands of the poor in the United States die every year of diseases we can easily cure, comma, end quote, said the professor, period. New sentence, a new quote. It's a crime, comma, but no one is ever punished for their deaths. In the next one, this quote is preceded by a complete sentence. Thomas said students should never be spanked. Well, since Thomas said this quote, you could introduce this quote with a colon. Thomas said students should never be spanked, colon. A young boy or girl who gets spanked in front of peers becomes embarrassed and the object of ridicule, period, end quote. The next one. What's happening here is this quote in the example begins with the lawyer said, and a couple of lines later it has the lawyer continued. So you can work with these quotes to move the attribution deeper inside the quote. Typically, you don't need to start with the person's name or title unless that's the most important or powerful part of the quotation. Typically, what the person says is going to be more interesting than the person's name or title. So in this case, what he's saying, he or she is saying, he ripped the life-sustaining respirator tubes from his throat 3 times in an effort to die, comma, end quote, attribution, the lawyer said, period. Quote, he is simply a man who rejects medical treatment regardless of the consequences. He wants to die and has a constitutional right to do so. Because this flows now, you don't need to have the lawyer continued as well as the lawyer said. And by placing the attribution partway through the 3 different sentences, it's clear who's doing the speaking, and you only need to say it 1 time. In this number 14 example, what's happening is that it is the preparation that counts as a partial quote being incorporated into this last sentence. So because Knight added that, quote, it is the preparation that counts, you don't need a comma. And you don't need to capitalize it. It would be actually equally correct here to punctuate this with Knight added comma, quotation mark, capital I, it is the preparation that counts. In the last example, what's happening here is 2 partial quotes, must do more and support and retrain. This is a correct example. She said she firmly believes the federal government, quote, must do more, end quote, to help cities, quote, support and retrain, end quote, the chronically unemployed. These partial quotes are integrated into the complete sentence. They don't need any punctuation to set them off, nor do they need any capitalization. And the quoted material is contained within quotation marks to set it off. And that's how you would correctly punctuate these examples. A couple of resources for you. I've put on Blackboard in the folder for grammar exercises. This English Composition 1 shows how to introduce the quotation with a complete sentence and colon, how to use an introductory or explanatory phrase, but not a complete sentence. And when you make the quotation a part of your own sentence, okay? And it also shows how this is explained in this 3-minute video here. And both of these are on YouTube for you. So please let me know if you have any questions, and take care for now.